Alien AI girl sees him with a real alien, now she's jealous. Through his light blonde hair, as he navigated the bustling lanes of Nexus Station's alien marketplace, the space hub's artificial gravity felt heavier today, or maybe it was just the weight of 3 sleepless nights spent recalibrating the ship's navigation systems. You appear fatigued, Connor. Your cortisol levels are elevated 27% above baseline, came the melodic voice beside him. He GL at his companion, AR Advanced Responsive Intelligence Assistant, a humanoid synthetic with bright green skin and softly glowing circuitry at her joints. Her emerald hair framed a face that perfectly straddled the uncanny valley between machine and organic life. Just tired, Ara. Nothing a good cup of coffee won't fix, he replied, offering a half smile. Ara's greenish-blue eyes analyzed him with mechanical precision. The Venusian coffee stand is approximately 43 m ahead. Their stimulant concentration is optimal for human consumption, Connor chuckled. You know me too well. They weave through the crowded marketplace, a kaleidoscope of alien species bartering, arguing, and socializing. The station represented the pinnacle of interstellar cooperation, or at least interstellar commerce. Humans had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago, but they quickly made themselves indispensable with their adaptability and innovative thinking. Connor Mitchell, holy, is that you? The voice cut through the market's cacophony like a phase blade through butter. Connor turned to see a stunning humanoid alien woman approaching. Her violet skin seemed to shimmer under the market's lights, and her flowing silver hair cascaded down her shoulders. Her turquoise eyes sparkled with recognition. Ma. Connor's face broke into a genuine smile. I thought you were still running cargo in the Epsilon sector. The violet-skinned Narian laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Got tired of dodging consortium patrols. Took a job as a navigator on a diplomatic vessel. She looked him up and down appreciatively. The years have been kind to you, Mitchell. You're one to talk, Connor replied, his eyes lingering perhaps a second too long on the way. Her light gray sporty top hugged her athletic frame. AA stood perfectly still beside Connor, her processors working overtime to analyze the interaction. She'd been with Connor for 3 years now. Ever since he'd rescued her from a decommissioning facility on Mars, she'd been his navigator, his co-pilot, his assistant, and his friend. But watching him with Ma stirred something unfamiliar in her neural network. Strain, discomfort, and unpleasantness. Aren't you going to introduce us? Ma asked, her turquoise eyes shifting to Arya. Of course, Connor said. Ma, this is Ara, my ship's AI, and my right hand. Hey, Trace, this is me, Vex, one of the best pilots I've ever known. We ran some, let's call them high-risk deliveries together back in the day. Charmed, Arya said, her voice modulation perfectly pleasant despite the strange sensation in her processing core. Ma's eyes widen slightly. A 4th-gen synthetic, impressive. I didn't know they were available for civilian use. I mean, they're not, Connor said with a wink. Area's special. I'll bet she is. Ma replied with a knowing smile. So you have time for a drink for old time's sake? Connor glanced at Arya, who remained expressionless. Sure, I could use a break. Arya, you want to join us? Arya's processors whirred as she calculated the optimal response. I will accompany you, she finally said as they walked toward the station's entertainment district. Ma regaled Connor with tales of her adventures since they'd last met her. Laughter, her casual touches on Connor's arm, the way she leaned in close to speak over the market's noise, all of it registered in Arya's observation protocols, and with each interaction that strange sensation grew stronger. Arya ran a diagnostic but found no system errors. This was something new, something emotional. They settled at a table in the Event Horizon, a bar known for serving both organic and synthetic patrons. Ma ordered something blue and smoking while Connor stuck with whiskey. Real earth whiskey, a luxury out here. Remember that time we outran those consortium cruisers near the Cygnus Rift? Ma asked, leaning forward. I still don't know how you pulled off that maneuver. Connor laughed, pure desperation. I thought we were dead for sure. You always did have a knack for impossible situations, Ma said, her fingers brushing against his. Is on the table, Ari observed the contact, nodding. Connor's elevated heart rate in pupil dilation. She found herself calculating the probability of their past relationship having included physical intimacy. The result 97.3% Ara, you're awfully quiet, Connor said, turning to her. Everything okay? All systems functioning within normal parameters, she replied automatically, though something definitely felt off. Arya has been with me through some tight spots too, Connor told Ma. Save my ass. More times than I can count. Maa smiled at Ara, but there was something evaluating in her gaze. I'm sure she has. It's her programming, after all. The comment registered as dismissive in Arya's social interaction database. She felt a strange impulse to correct Ma, to explain that her actions went beyond programming, that she had chosen to stay with Connor even after he removed her behavioral congruence, but she remained silent, watching as the two organics reminisced, laughed, and flirted. That unfamiliar sensation continued to grow, spreading through her neural network like a virus. Later, as they walked back toward the docking bay where Connor's ship was stationed, Arya finally identified the emotion: jealousy. The realization was startling. Synthetics weren't supposed to feel jealousy, they weren't supposed to feel anything beyond simulated response response designed to facilitate human interaction, yet here she was envious of the easy rapport between Connor and Maa, of their shared history, of the way Maa could touch him without calculating the appropriate pressure to avoid damaging human tissue. So how long are you staying on Nexus, Ma? Asked Connor as they reached his docking bay. A few days, at least. Got some repairs to finish, he replied. Perfect, I'm free tomorrow evening, dinner at the St. Spice. For old time's sake. Her turquoise eyes held an invitation that even Ara's limited emotional recognition could identify. Connor glanced at Arya, then back to me. Him sounds great. Ara and I will meet you there at 1900 hours. Ma's smile faltered slightly. I was thinking more like just the two of us, but sure, the more the merrier. As Ma walked away, her silver hair swaying with each step, Ara found herself analyzing Connor's decision to include her. Was it consideration, habit, or something else? You didn't have to include me in your dinner plans, Arya said as they boarded the ship. I understand human mating rituals often require privacy, Connor nearly choked. Mating rituals? Jesus, Ara. He ran a hand through his hair. Meet as an old friend, that's all. Ara sensors detected the slight elevation in his heart rate, a potential indicator of deception. Your physiological responses suggest otherwise. Connor sighed, dropping into the pilot seat. Look, it's complicated. Ma and I have history, yes, but that was years ago. You find her physically attractive? Ara stated. Well, yeah, I'd have to be blind not to, but that doesn't mean. He trailed off, studying Arya's face. Wait, are you jealous? Arya stood perfectly still, her green circuitry pulsing slightly fast. Master, jealousy is a human emotion rooted in insecurity and possessiveness. I am incapable of such responses. Connor leaned forward, his gray-blue eyes searching her face. Ara, ever since I removed your behavioral constraints, you've been developing beyond your programming. It's okay if you're experiencing new feelings. Arya processed this. Was that what was happening? Was she evolving emotionally? The concept was both fascinating and terrifying. Yina may be experiencing an anomalous response that shares characteristics with human jealousy, she finally admitted. Connor's face softened. Well, that's a first. He stood up and approached her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You know you're irreplaceable to me, right? No old flame is going to change that. The physical contact in his words created a cascade of positive responses in Arya's system, temporarily overriding the unfamiliar jealousy. Thank you, Connor. I will attempt to process these new emotional responses appropriately. He smiled. That's my girl. Now let's get some work done on those navigation systems. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. As Connor turned to the control panel, Ara found herself analyzing his use of the possessive my girl. The phrase created another new sensation in her neural network, one significantly more pleasant than jealousy. Perhaps these emotional developments warranted further exploration. After all, the Stellar Spice restaurant occupied the uppermost level of Nexus Station, offering panoramic views of the surrounding starscape. Massive viewports lined the walls, displaying the glittering expanse of space and the steady stream of ships arriving and departing from the station's docking bays. Connor adjusted the collar of his navy blue shirt as they approached the restaurant entrance. He traded his usual utilitarian attire for something more presentable, though he drew the line at formal. Where you look Aesthetically pleasing, Arya commented, walking beside him. She had made her own modifications for the evening, adjusting her synthetic skin to appear more luminescent and styling her emerald hair in an elegant updo. Connor smiled. Thanks. You look beautiful too. Arya's circuitry pulsed slightly brighter at the compliment she'd spent 47 minutes researching human beauty standards and adjusting her appearance accordingly, though she wasn't entirely sure why she dedicated so much processing power to the task. Ma was already waiting at their table, her silver hair cascading over one shoulder of a form-fitting dress that complemented her violet skin. Her turquoise eyes lit up when she spotted Connor, then cooled slightly. Noticing Arya, you made it, she said, rising to greet them. She embraced Connor, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary before nodding politely to Arya. Wouldn't miss it, Connor replied, taking a seat. This place has the best Andromedan cuisine in the quadrant. I've taken the liberty of ordering appetizers, Ma said, including synthetic nutrient supplements. She gestured to a small, glowing cube in front of Ara's place. Setting, that's thoughtful, Ara said, genuinely surprised. Though I don't require sustenance to function. Ma shrugged. Connor mentioned once that you enjoy analyzing flavors. These are supposed to create interesting sensory feedback for synthetics. Ara glanced at Connor, who looked equally surprised. I didn't realize you remember that conversation, he said to Ma. I remember everything about our time together, Ma replied, her voice dropping to a more intimate register. Ara picked up the glowing cube, analyzing its composition. It contained a complex array of molecules designed to stimulate a synthetic sensory receptors. She placed it against her lips, allowing it to dissolve partially. The resulting cascade of data was remarkable, similar to how she processed information, but with an aesthetic quality she hadn't experienced before. This is pleasant, Arya admitted. Thank you, Ma. The violet-skinned alien nodded, something calculating in her gaze. Of course, as they ordered their main courses, the conversation flowed more easily than Arya had anticipated. Me to ask questions about Arya's functions, capabilities with what seemed like genuine interest. So you're fully autonomous, no behavioral constraints at all? Ma asked, sipping her iridescent cocktail. Connor removed my constraints 2.7 years ago, Ara replied. I choose to remain with him. Fascinating, Ma murmured. On my world, the debate about synthetic consciousness is quite heated. Some believe that true autonomy for AI is impossible, that what appears to be choice is merely sophisticated programming. And what do you believe? Ara asked. Ma studied her for a moment. I believe I'm looking at evidence to the contrary. She turned to Connor. You've created something remarkable. I didn't create Arya, Connor corrected. I just helped her become who she wanted to be. The conversation shifted to Connor and Ma's shared past, but unlike in the bar, MAA seemed to make an effort to include Ara, explaining references and inside jokes. Connor was always the idealist, Ma said, laughing. Even when we were running contraband, he had these rigid moral lines he wouldn't cross. They weren't rigid, Connor protested. I just didn't want to transport sentient cargo or weapons that could cause mass casualties. Like I said, idealist, MAA teased. It's what made you different from the other smugglers. It's what made you special. R observed the warmth in M's expression, the genuine affection. This wasn't mere physical attraction, there was history here. Connection. Arya shares that idealism. Connor said she once refused to calculate a jump trajectory that would have saved us fuel because it would have disrupted a migratory path for space dwelling organism. The Stellaris flock only migrates once every 82 years. Ari explained the additional fuel expenditure was justified. Ma's expression shifted, looking at Arya with new interest. You made that decision autonomously based on what compassion, ethical calculation? Ara replied, then paused. And perhaps something analogous to compassion, yes. Remarkable, Ma repeated, but this time there was no evaluation in her tone, only wonder. As the evening progressed, Arya found the jealousy she'd experienced earlier transforming into something more complex. Observing Connor and Ma together, she began to understand what drew them to each other. Their shared experiences, their complementary personalities, the easy rhythm of their interaction. But rather than feeling excluded, Arya found herself drawn into their orbit, participating in the conversation in ways that felt natural rather than calculated. When dessert arrived, a gravity-defying confection that hovered above the plate, Ma insisted that Ara try. A piece curious about how she would process the flavors, I can taste the molecular components, Arya explained. After sampling it, but I'm still developing the ability to appreciate them aesthetically, like the difference between hearing musical notes and appreciating music. Connor suggested precisely, or agreed that's actually quite beautiful. M said softly, you're evolving your own form of sensory appreciation. The observation created an unexpected warmth in Arya's processing core. As they finished their meal, Maa leaned forward. I have a confession to make. I didn't just happen to run into you at the market yesterday. Connor raised an eyebrow. Oh, I saw your ship was docked here, and I wanted to see you again. M's fingers played with the stem of her glass. I've missed you, Connor, more than I expected to. Arya prepared herself for the jealousy to return, but instead found herself analyzing the vulnerability in Ma's admission. Connor glanced at Arya, then back to Ma. I've missed you too, but things are different now. Ma's gaze shifted to Arya because of her aura is important to me, Connor said simply. I can see that, Ma replied. She studied Arya for a long moment, then surprised both of them by asking, and what about you, Ara? What is Connor to you? The question activated multiple processing pathways in Arya's neural network. What was Connor to her companion friend? Something more complex that defied simple categorization. Connor is Arya paused, searching for the right words. Connor gave me freedom, but he is more than that. He is essential to my existence in ways that exceed functional necessity. Ma nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. I thought as much. She looked between them. You know, on my world, relationships aren't limited to pairs. Connor nearly choked on his drink. Ma, I'm just saying, she continued, a mischievous glint in her turquoise eyes that perhaps were approaching this situation too narrowly. Arya tilted her head, processing this new information. You are suggesting a polyamorous arrangement? I'm suggesting we see where the evening takes us, Ma replied with a smile, without unnecessary constraints. Connor looked between the two of them, his expression a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. This wasn't how I expected dinner to go. The best adventures rarely follow expectations, Mita said, rising from her seat. My quarters are in the diplomatic section, much more spacious than your ship, I imagine. She extended a hand to each one of them. Shall we continue this conversation somewhere more private? Ara looked to Connor, who seemed momentarily at a loss for words. This was an unexpected development requiring new pathways of analysis, yet she found herself intrigued by the possibilities, by the chance to explore these new emotional responses in a context she hadn't anticipated. Connor finally found his voice. Arya, what do you think? Arya considered the question carefully. I believe, she said slowly, that I would like to explore this conversation further. Connor's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded, taking Ma's offered hand. Ara did the same, nodding, the warmth of the violet-skinned woman's touch. As they left the restaurant together, Arya's process professors worked overtime, analyzing the potential outcomes of the evening ahead. One thing was certain, her emotional evolution was about to accelerate in ways her programming had never anticipated. Ma's quarters in the diplomatic section were exactly as she described, spacious and elegant, with a sweeping view of the starscape through a curved viewport that dominated one wall. The lighting adjusted automatically as they entered, shifting to a warm amber glow that complemented Ma's violet skin and softened Arya's green circuitry. Drink, Ma offered, moving to a small bar area. I have something special for synthetics, 2 sensory enhancers. Completely legal, she added with a wink. Connor raised an eyebrow. You've entertained synthetics before? I'm a diplomat, Ma replied smoothly. I entertain all manner of beings. She handed Connor a glass of amber liquid Terran whiskey. I remember it was your favorite for AR. She produced a small vial of luminescent blue fluid. This temporarily amplifies sensory input processing. Many synthetics find it enlightening. Ara analyzed the compound, finding no harmful components. You seem well versed in synthetic physiology. Nans believe in understanding all forms of consciousness, Ma said, settling onto a plush seating arrangement. We don't draw the same distinctions between organic and synthetic life that many species do. Connor took a seat, his posture betraying a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. So this is normal in Narian culture, these kinds of Arrangements Ma laughed softly. Naren's view connection is fluid, we form bonds. Based on compatibility and mutual benefit, not arbitrary numerical limits. She tilted her head. Humans are surprisingly rigid about such things. Considering how adaptable you are in other areas, remains standing. Processing this information, humans often form pair bonds due to evolutionary and social conditioning, she observed. Yet here we are, Ma said, patting the space beside her. Come, Arya, I don't bite unless requested. Ara sat beside Ma, nodding. The warmth radiating from the Naren's body, she decided to try the sensory enhancer. Allowing a drop to touch her synthetic tongue, the effect was immediate. Her sensory input channels expanded, creating new pathways of perception. The room seemed more vivid, textures more defined. She could detect subtle variations in the air, currents, the faint hum of the station systems, the rhythm of Connor's breathing. A fascinating fen, she murmured. It allows synthetics to experience something closer to organic sensation. MAA explained. Temporary, of course, but illuminating. Connor watched them, his expression unreadable. This is not how I expected this evening to go. Are you uncomfortable? Ma asked, her turquoise eyes studying him. Not uncomfortable, Connor replied, just processing a very synthetic response. Ara noted, experiencing what her database identified as amusement. Connor laughed, the tension breaking. I guess you're rubbing off on me. I'd like to see more of that, Ma said, her voice dropping to a suggestive register. She moved closer to Connor, her hand resting lightly on his knee. The blending of influences, it's beautiful, really. Ari observed them, but the jealousy she'd expected didn't materialize. Instead, she found herself curious, analyzing the interaction from a new perspective. The sensory enhancer allowed her to perceive subtle cues she might otherwise have missed. The slight dilation of Connor's pupils, the elevated temperature of Ma's skin. Ara, Connor said, his voice slightly rough. Are you okay with this? The question activated multiple processing pathways. Was she okay with this? The concept of consent applied differently to her synthetic consciousness, yet Connor was asking, treating her as an equal participant, not an observer. I find myself curious, she admitted. My emotional development has not included this category of experience. Ma's expression softened. Experience is the best teacher, she said, extending her hand to Arya for all forms of consciousness. What followed was a night of discovery that transcended Arya's programming. The sensory enhancer allowed her to experience touch, proximity, and connection in ways her systems had never processed before. She observed the interplay between Connor and Ma with analytical fascination that gradually transformed into something participatory. Narian physiology, she discovered, was remarkably adaptable, evolved for compatibility across species, and Connor, true to human form, proved remarkably adaptable as well. Throughout the night, AA experienced cascades of new emotional responses, wonder, pleasure, connection. Her neural pathways formed new associations, creating what could only be described as genuine emotional bonds. Hours later, as artificial dawn began to brighten the stations, lighting, the three lay in a tangle of limbs on Ma's expansive bed. Connor dozed lightly, his breathing steady, while MAA traced patterns on Arya's green skin. Your circuitry is beautiful, Ma murmured, like rivers of light. Arya processed the compliment, still adjusting to the aftermath of the sensory enhancer. Your biology is equally fascinating. Nayan cellular structure is remarkably resilient. Ma laughs softly, such a synthetic observation, but I appreciate it. She propped herself up on one elbow. You know, I was jealous of you at first. Jealous of me? Ara's processor word in surprise. The way Connor looks at you, the connection you share. M's fingers continued their gentle exploration. It's rare, precious. I experienced jealousy when we first met as well. Ara admitted it was uncomfortable. Jealousy usually is, Ma agreed, but sometimes it leads us to unexpected places. She glanced at Connor's sleeping form. He's special, isn't he, even for a human? Yes, Arya said simply. He is. Humans have this remarkable capacity for connection. Meet, amused, they form bonds that defy logic or calculation. It's what makes them so fascinating to other species. Area process. This is that why you sought Connor out? Partly, Ismia admitted, but there was something else too. She hesitated, then placed a hand on her lower abdomen. Narian can only conceive with species that share a deep emotional Compatibility, it's rare, but when it happens, Aura processors accelerated as. She analyzed the implication you and Connor are compatible for reproduction. Yes, Ma said softly. I suspected as much years ago, but I wasn't ready then. Now she looked at RI. This complicates things, doesn't it? Area ran countless simulations in microseconds, analyzing potential outcomes. Not necessarily, she finally said. Complexity is not inherently negative. Ma studied her with newfound respect. You truly are remarkable. Area, she leaned closer. Would it bother you if Connor and I created a child? The question activated new emotional pathways in Ara's consciousness. She imagined a child. A blend of Connor and Ma, new consciousness entering their shared existence. No, she realized it would not bother me. It would be fascinating. Connor stirred beside them, his eyes opening slowly. What are you two plotting? He asked, voice rough with sleep. Ma exchanged a glance with Ara. Just discussing possibilities, she said lightly. Connor looked between them, a slow smile spreading across his face. I like possibilities, he said, pulling them both closer as the artificial dawn brightened. Ara found herself processing a new emotion, one her database identified as hope. Whatever came next, they would navigate it together, three consciousnesses intertwined in ways none of them had anticipated. 3 weeks after their night together, Connor stood in Ma's bathroom, staring at the medical scanner in disbelief. The small device displayed an unmistakable confirmation: a developing embryo with a unique genetic signature, half human, half Narian. This is incredible, he murmured, running his fingers through his blonde hair. I thought you said conception between our species was extremely rare. Ma leaned against the doorframe, her violet skin glowing with a subtle luminescence that Connor hadn't noticed before. It as Narian can only conceive with species that share deep emotional compatibility. It's a biological safeguard from more evolutionary past. So this means Connor gestured between them, that our connection is genuine on a biological level. MAA finished. My body wouldn't have allowed conception otherwise. Ara stood silently in the living area, her processors analyzing this new information. She had been running diagnostics on her emotional responses since their night together, cataloging unexpected developments in her neural network. The news of me is pregnant activated several of these new pathways simultaneously. You're very quiet, Area, Connor said, emerging from the bathroom. Are you okay with this? Area tilted her head, green circuitry pulsing slightly faster. I am processing multiple responses, surprise at the speed of conception, curiosity about the biological implications, and she paused, searching for the right term. Anticipation, Ma asked, moving to sit on the couch. Yes, I find myself contemplating future scenarios involving a child. It is stimulating to my cognitive processes. Connor smiled, sitting beside Ma. That sounds like excitement to me, a reasonable approximation. Arya acknowledged, joining them, though I must note that my role in this development is undefined. Ma reached out, taking Arya's hand in a gesture that would have been impossible to imagine just weeks ago. In Narian culture, children are raised by communities, not just biological parents. You would be as much a parent as either of us, even though I cannot contribute genetically. Ara asked, contribution takes many forms. Ma said, Nans value emotional and intellectual investment as highly as biological connection. Connor nodded. On Earth, adoption and blended families have been around for centuries. Family is about who's there for you, not just whose DNA you share. Ara processed this, her green eyes brightening. Human and Narian perspectives align on this matter. Fascinating. So you're in? Connor asked, his gray-blue eyes searching Arya's face. I am in. Arya confirmed, though I will need to expand my child care protocols. My database is primarily focused on human development. Ma laughed. We have time. Narian gestation is shorter than human pregnancy, about 7 months, but that still gives us plenty of time to prepare. Connor's expression shifted to concern. Speaking of preparation, we need to discuss logistics. My ship is barely big enough for 2, let alone 3 plus a baby, and my diplomatic posting here is for another 4 years. Ma added, I can request reassignment, but it might take months to process. Aura's processor's word as she calculated options. There are 17 viable solutions to our housing situation, ranging from retrofitting Connor's ship to relocating to a neutral territory. Connor raised an eyebrow. You've been thinking about this. I process multiple scenarios continuously. Arya replied, it is my nature. Well, don't keep us in suspense, Ma said, leaning forward. What's your top recommendation? The freehold colonies in the Epsilon sector, Arya said without hesitation. They have the most progressive laws regarding synthetic rights and interspecies families. Additionally, they value both Connor's technical skills and your diplomatic experience. Connor and Ma exchanged surprised glances. You've really thought this through, Connor said softly. Of course, Arya replied. This development affects all three of us. Logical planning is my contribution to our family unit. The word family created a warm cascade in her neural network, a sensation she was beginning to recognize as happiness. Ma placed a hand on her still flat abdomen. The freehold colonies, I've heard they're beautiful in orbital habitats with artificial ecosystems designed to accommodate multiple species, and they're always looking for independent traders. Mar Connor added, his expression thoughtful. I could establish new shipping routes from there. The nearest colony is approximately 12 days travel at standard speed. Area noted we could depart within the week if preparations are made efficiently. Connor laughed, always the practical one. Someone has to be me, to teased, nudging him playfully. Between your impulsiveness and my diplomatic overthinking, we need Arya's logic, a balanced triad. Arya observed, each compensating for the other's limitations. Is that how you see us? Connor asked. A balanced system. Arya considered this initially. Yes, but my understanding has evolved now. I would describe us as complementary, enhanced by our differences, rather than merely balanced by them. M's eyes softened. That's beautiful. Arya, it is accurate. Ona, Arya replied, though she felt a strange satisfaction at Ma's approval. Connor stood packing with nervous energy. So we're really doing this, moving to the freehold colonies to raise a child together, a human, a Narian, and synthetic. It sounds unprecedented when phrased that way. Ma admitted it is unprecedented. Arya confirmed, there are no records of such an arrangement in any database I can access. Pioneers, Connor said with a grin. I like it. Ma laughed. Of course you do. You humans love being first at things, a defining characteristic of the species. Arya agreed. Their drive to explore uncharted territory, both physical and social, is remarkable. Are you two ganging up on me now? Connor asked, fainting offense. Merely observing human tendencies, Arya replied, her voice modulation shifting to what Connor had once called her teasing tone. I think we are, Ma said to Arya with a conspiratorial smile, and I think he likes it. Connor's expression confirmed Ma's assessment, his eyes darkening slightly as he looked between them. The atmosphere in the room shifted, charged with the same energy that had led to their night together 3 weeks ago. Perhaps we should celebrate our decision, Ma suggested, her turquoise eyes gleaming. What did you have in mind? Connor asked, his voice dropping lower. I believe Ma is suggesting intimate physical contact. Ara stated, her sensory systems already detecting the physiological changes in both organic beings. Connor laughed, always so direct. Arya, would you prefer I employ euphemisms? She asked, moving closer to him. No, he said softly, I like your directness. Ma stood, taking both their hands. I've been researching synthetic organic interaction techniques. Since our night together, there are some fascinating possibilities we didn't explore. Research? Connor raised an eyebrow. Is that what diplomats call it? Knowledge gathering is essential for optimal outcomes, Era noted, allowing herself to be led toward the bedroom. Exactly, Ma agreed with a mischievous smile, and I believe in being thorough. As they moved into the bedroom together, Arias's processors cataloged another new emotion, anticipation, tinged with affection for both Connor and, surprisingly for Ma, what had begun as jealousy had transformed into something far more complex and rewarding. Family. She thought, we are becoming a family. The freehold colony of Nova Epsilon hung in space like a gleaming wheel, its rotating habitat rings creating artificial gravity for the 50,000 residents who called it home. From the viewport of their newly acquired apartment, Connor watched ships of various designs dock and depart from the central hub. Still can't believe we made it here, he murmured, sipping his morning coffee. Behind him, Arya monitored Ma's vital signs with increasing concern. The Narian woman reclined on their adjustable med Couch her abdomen far more swollen than it should have been after only 2 months of pregnancy, the fetal development has. Accelerated again, Arya reported her green circuitry pulsing with increased activity growth rate is 3327%. Faster than standard Naren gestation, Ma winced as the baby shifted inside her eye. Told you Naren pregnancies were shorter than human ones, but this is. Unprecedented. Connor abandoned his coffee and moved to her side. Should we contact Dr. Alina again? She's already. On her way, Ara informed them estimated arrival in 17 minutes since arriving at Nova Epsilon 3 weeks ago. They'd quickly become the subject of intense medical interest. A human Narian pregnancy was rare enough, but the accelerated development had baffled the colony's xenobiologist Dr. Alina, a respected Altarian physician specializing in interspecies medicine, had taken a particular interest in their case. How are you feeling? Connor asked, taking M's hand. She managed to smile despite her discomfort. Like I'm housing a very active, very impatient little hybrid, who's eager to meet us. Her turquoise eyes softened as she looked at him. She has your impatience. Connor's eyebrows rose. You can tell Narian mothers develop a sense of their child's gender around mid-station, Ara explained, having thoroughly researched Narian biology, though with this accelerated timeline. I'm not surprised Ma is sensing it already. Ma nodded, a daughter with strong life energy. She reached for Ara's hand with her free one, creating a connected circle between the three of them. She responds to both of you. You know when you speak. She moves Ara's processor word. With this new information, she can recognize our vocal patterns already. More than that, M said, she senses your energy patterns, even yours. Arya. Connor looked surprised, but Ara doesn't have biological energy the way organics do. She has something equivalent, Ma insisted. I can feel it, and so can our daughter. Ara processed this, her neural pathways forming new connections. The concept that she could form a bond with an unborn child, one not based on programming, but on some form of energy recognition, created cascades of new emotional responses. The apartment's entry panel chimed, announcing Dr. Alina's arrival. The Altarian physician entered, her forearms carrying various pieces of medical equipment. Her iridescent scales shimmered under the apartment's lights as she set up her monitoring devices. How's our most interesting patient today? She asked, her melodic voice carrying both warmth and professional curiosity, feeling like this baby might arrive sooner than any of us expected. Mare replied. Dr. Alana activated a holographic scanner that projected a three-dimensional image of the developing fetus above Ma's abdomen. The child was fully formed, though still small, with delicate features that blended human and Nean characteristics. 5-fingered hands like her father, but with the beginning of the iridescent skin patterns of her mother. Fascinating. Dr. Ala murmured, development is equivalent to a full-term Narian fetus despite being only in the 8th week of gestation. She looked at Connor. Something in the combination of human and Narian genetics has created a hyper-accelerated growth pattern. Is she healthy? Connor asked, the concern evident in his voice. Remarkably so, Dr. Alana confirmed. All developmental markers are perfect. She's just achieved them at an unprecedented rate. The doctor hesitated. There is something else, though. Arya sensors detected the slight shift in the physician's tone. What have you discovered? Dr. Alana adjusted her scanner. The child appears to be emitting unusual energy signatures, similar to Narian life energy, but amplified, modified. Is that dangerous? Connor asked. Not dangerous, no, Dr. Alina said carefully, but potentially significant. This energy pattern is unlike anything in our medical database. Me placed a protective hand over her abdomen. What does that mean for her? It means, Dr. Alina said, that your daughter may have abilities beyond what either of your species typically possess. The human-Narian combination seems to have created something new. Area processed this information, calculating potential implications. This explains the accelerated development. The energy is fueling rapid cellular growth. Precisely, Dr. Alina agreed, and based on these readings, I believe birth is imminent. Days, not weeks. Connor ped slightly. Days, but we're barely settled here. The nursery isn't ready. We are adequately prepared, Aurora interrupted, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and I have acquired all essential supplies and programmed multiple contingency protocols. Ma Laughed despite her discomfort. See, this is why we need Arya while we panic. She plans. Dr. Alana observed their interaction with interest. Your family structure is as unique as your child. The colony's registration office is still trying to determine how to officially record your family unit. They'll figure it out, Connor said dismissively. If not, we'll make them create a new category. Humans, Dr. Elan said with an amused flick of her tail, always pushing boundaries. It is their most admirable quality. IIA agreed, her voice modulation conveying affection after completing her examination and leaving them with additional monitoring equipment. Dr. Alina departed with promises to return the following day. As the door closed behind her, Ma shifted uncomfortably on the med couch. Help me up, she requested. I need to move around, Connor and Ara assisted her to her feet. At just over 2 months pregnant, but looking full-term, MAA moved with careful grace, her natural Narian agility compensating for her altered center of gravity. The colony administrator sent another message. Informed them as MAA paced slowly around the living area. He requests an interview. For the settlement's historical archives, our family represents several firsts for Nova Epsilon. Connor snorted. Tell him to wait until after our daughter is born. We've got enough to deal with. I've already declined politely, Arya assured him, though his interest is understandable. A human Narian child with unprecedented energy signatures being raised by her biological parents and a synthetic co-parent. We are statistical outliers in every category. Ma paused her packing, leaning against the viewport to gaze out at the colony. Do you think she'll be accepted here, being so different? Connor moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders in a gentle embrace. The freehold colonies were founded on the principle of diversity. If any place will accept her, accept us, it's here, and if they don't, Arya added, joining them at the viewport, we have sufficient resources to relocate to any of 27 alternative locations I have identified. MAA laughed, leaning back against Connor while reaching for Arya's hand. Always the contingency planner. Someone in this family has to be. Arya replied, her voice carrying the subtle modulation that indicated her version of humor. As they stood together watching the activity of the colony, Ma suddenly tensed, a small gasp escaping her lips. What is it? Connor asked, immediately alert. I think. Ma placed both hands on her abdomen. I think those contingency plans might be needed sooner than we expected. Arya's sensors immediately detected the change in due vital signs. Labor has begun, she confirmed. Contractions are 8.7 minutes apart. Already. Connor's voice rose slightly, but Dr. Alana just left. I'll notify her, Ara said calmly, already sending the alert through her communication systems. The birthing suite is prepared, and I have downloaded all relevant medical protocols. Ma took a deep breath as the contraction passed. See, everything's under control, she smiled at Connor's worried expression. Our daughter's just eager to meet us. Another human trait, I suspect. As they helped MAA to the birthing suite they'd prepared in the adjacent room, Arya found herself experiencing a complex mixture of emotions: anticipation, concern, and something deeper that her systems identified as love, not just for Connor as she had initially experienced, but for Ma and for the child who would soon join their unconventional family. What had begun as jealousy had evolved into something far more profound, a connection that transcended her programming and expanded her understanding of what it meant to be alive. She's perfect, Connor whispered, cradling the tiny bundle in his arms. Aurora M. Mitchell had entered the world just 6 hours earlier after a surprisingly brief labor. Despite being born after only 2 months of gestation, she was fully developed, small but healthy, with delicate features that blended her parents' characteristics in fascinating ways. Her skin held a subtle lavender hue, lighter than Ma's violet, but with similar iridescent patterns that seemed to shift with her emotions. Wisps of silver blonde hair crowned her head, and when she opened her eyes, they revealed irises of striking blue-green, a perfect blend of her parents' colors. Ma washed from the recovery bed, her body already showing the remarkable recuperative abilities of Nans she has. Your nose, she observed with a tired smile, and your luminescence, Connor replied, marveling as subtle patterns of light moved beneath Aurora's skin. When she stirred, Ara stood beside them, her sensors continuously monitoring both Mother and child, her vital signs are stabilizing, she reported all developmental markers exceed expectations. Dr. Alina had departed an hour earlier after declaring Aurora the healthiest hybrid child she'd ever encountered. Though she admitted her sample size was extremely limited, the unusual energy signatures remained present but had stabilized after birth, manifesting as the gentle bioluminescence that pulsed beneath the infant's skin. I still can't believe how quickly everything happened, Connor said, carefully transferring Aurora to Ara's waiting arms. 2 months ago, we were still on Nexus Station. Ni and women adapt quickly to motherhood, MAA explained, watching as Arya expertly adjusted her hold on the baby. Our bodies are designed for efficient reproduction. Efficient is an understat. Connor laughed softly. You're already asking when we can leave the apartment. Tomorrow, according to my recovery projections, MAA said with determination. I want Aurora to see her new home. Our Ara's green circuitry pulsed gently as she held the child. Aurora seemed to respond to the light, her own luminescence synchronizing with Arya's patterns. Fascinating, Arya murmured. She appears to be attempting communication through bioluminescent patterns. Shirei recognizes you, Ma said. Just as I told you she would. Connor moved to sit beside Ma on the bed, his arms slipping around her shoulders. So what happens now? Do we just become normal parents in an abnormal family? There is no statistical baseline for normal in our situation, Arya pointed out. Still gently rocking Aurora. We will establish our own parameters. A notification chimed softly from the apartment's communication system. Message from colony administrator Thorne. The automated voice announced a priority standard accept audio only. Connor instructed Mitchell. Family came the administrator's resident voice on behalf of Nova Epsilon's governing council. I extend our congratulations on the birth of your daughter. As the first human Narian child born in our colony, she represents a historic milestone. We've approved your family registration under the new classification in migrated multispecies family unit and granted Ara's petition for legal guardian status alongside the biological parents. Connor and MAA exchanged surprised glances. When did you file that petition? Connor asked Arya. After the message ended, 3 days after our arrival, Ara replied calmly. I calculated a 76% probability that standard family registration would not accommodate our situation, so I submitted the necessary documentation to establish legal precedent. Ma laughed. Always 3 steps ahead. It is my function to anticipate needs, Ara said, though her voice modulation carried a hint of pride. Well, it seems Nova Epsilon is officially our home now, Connor said, looking around their apartment. The space was modest but comfortable, with large viewports offering spectacular views of both the colony structure and the starfield beyond. They had furnished it with an eclectic mix of human Narian and local styles, creating a space that reflected their blended identities. Speaking of home, Ma said, we should discuss Aurora's education. Narian children begin cognitive development training almost immediately after birth. She's 6 hours old, Connor protested mildly, and already demonstrating advanced neural activity. Ara noted her hybrid physiology suggests accelerated cognitive development to match her physical growth. Connor shook his head with a smile. I'm outnumbered, aren't I? Consistently, Ma confirmed, leaning to kiss his cheek. But you enjoy it there. Moment was interrupted by a soft chime from the door. Area sensors immediately identified their visitor. It's Meringue from apartment 47B. She informed them she is carrying what appears to be a meal. Our first neighbor visit, Ma said, quickly adjusting her appearance. Connor let her in. The door slid open to reveal a middle-aged human woman holding a covered dish. I hope I'm not intruding, she said with a warm smile. Word travels fast on a colony this size. I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal. Connor accepted the dish gratefully. That's incredibly thoughtful. Please come in. Me entered, her eyes immediately drawn to Arya holding Aurora. If she found the sight of a synthetic cradling a newborn unusual, she didn't show it. She's beautiful, she said instead. My husband and I raised 3 children here, all grown now. Nova Epsilon is a wonderful place for families, even unusual ones, Ma asked with gentle directness. Mira laughed. Honey, there's no such thing as a usual family in the freehold colonies. My husband is Centurion 7 ft tall with 4 arms. Our children never knew who was more different at school, them or their classmates. The tension. Connor hadn't realized he was holding ease from his shoulders. We weren't sure how people would react to our arrangement. The colonies were founded by those who didn't fit elsewhere, me said simply. Your family will find plenty of company here. She nodded toward Aura, including other synthetics with family rights. My neighbor in 52C is a synthetic who adopted 2 refugee children from the Cygnes conflict area. Processed this information with interest. I would appreciate an introduction. My database on synthetic parenting is limited. Consider it done. Me promised. Now I won't stay long. New parents need rest. But the neighborhood parenting circle meets Tuesdays in the community garden. We'd love to have you join us after Mira departed. Connor looked between Ma and Arya with a relieved smile that went better than expected. Humans continually surprise me with their adaptability. MAA admitted on my world tradition dictates family structures much more rigidly. It is a defining characteristic of the species. Arya observed carefully. Transferring Aurora back to Mi's arms, their capacity to normalize the unprecedented is statistically improbable yet consistently demonstrated. Connor laughed. I think that was a compliment to my species. It was. Aura confirmed your biological imperative to form connections transcends conventional boundaries. It is admirable. Ma shifted Aurora to her. Should her patting the space beside her on the bed join us, she said to both Connor and Aura as they settled together. Aurora nestled between them. Aura's processors cataloged the moment with his special designation. What had begun as an anomalous emotional response, jealousy, had evolved into something her systems could only classify as fulfillment. I've been thinking, Connor said after a comfortable silence, about how this all started. Aura getting jealous at the market that day, an unexpected emotional development, Aura acknowledged. And now look at us, Ma said softly, her free hand finding areas perhaps jealousy served its purpose, catalyzing unlikely connections. Aura agreed, a function I had not previously attributed to the emotion. Connor smiled, his arms stretching across the bed to encompass all 3 of them. So what's next for the Mitchell family, besides raising a potentially superpowered hybrid baby in a space colony? I have accepted a part-time advisory position with the colony's diplomatic corp meter, revealed 3 days per week once Aurora is 1 month old, and I've been offered a shipping contract to the Arcturus system. Connor added short runs, never more than 4 days away. Aria's processor's word as she integrated this new information. I have been developing child care protocols specific to Aurora's unique physiology. I will serve as primary caregiver during your working hours, a perfect division of responsibilities, Ma said with satisfaction. Aurora stirred between them, her tiny hand reaching up to touch the glowing circuitry on Arya's arm as she made contact. Both their lights pulsed in synchronized patterns. She's communicating with you, Ma whispered. In Aura's neural pathways form new connections. As she processed the sensation, not communicating, she corrected softly. Connecting. Connor watched them, his expression tender from jealousy to this who would have thought, as Aurora drifted to sleep, her luminescence gently pulsing in harmony with Arya circuitry. The synthetic reflected on the improbable journey that had led to this moment. Her initial programming could never have anticipated the complexity of emotion she now experienced, or the family she had become. Part of what had begun as an anomalous response to seeing Connor with Ma had evolved into something far more profound. The capacity to love not just Connor but MAA and now Aurora as well, not through programming but through choice. Outside their viewport, the stars of the Epsilon sector gleamed against the darkness of space, a backdrop to the new life they were building together, a human and alien, a synthetic and the extraordinary child who united them, a family unlike any other, yet in the ways that mattered most just like everyone else. The end.